Hello and welcome to my Autism Ally podcast, where we come together to share helpful information about autism. Welcome to my Autism Ally podcast. This is Raising Those on the Spectrum, and today we're speaking with Joyce, and Joyce is going to tell us a little bit about herself and her individual on the spectrum. Welcome, Joyce.
Hi. Well, my name is Joyce Thomas, and I have been married for 35 years and have two daughters. My youngest is on the spectrum, and she was diagnosed young as ADD. And then it wasn't until she was about 12 or 13 that she was actually diagnosed with Asperger's, but she was also diagnosed with PTSD because of severe bullying that she dealt with in elementary and middle school. And so then we pulled her from public school for 3 years. And then she, through counseling and such, she was able to go back at 17 as a freshman and graduated 2 years ago at 21. And she's now currently 23. Basically got a little bit, I don't know how to call it, except headhunted. And she now works as a client advocate for a company in Fort Wayne that she's on their board for review, for client review.
Oh, that is super cool.
Very good.
I love that. So you said when was her original diagnosis that was not autism?
Her original diagnosis of ADD was in first grade.
Okay. And then her autism or Asperger's was when?
After middle school.
Okay. So that's quite a few years.
Yes.
Okay.
I happen to have worked in the mental health field for many years, and I worked with a lot of people with autism. And so I basically was raising her just using all the skills I already had, really not putting a diagnosis on it until it became an issue that we really needed to address.
So did you tell her right away when she was diagnosed what her diagnosis was, or did you kind of hold it back?
Oh, no, we actually discussed it with her before the full diagnosis.
Okay. So she was on board. She understood kind of what
completely.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I like that. I hid it from my child. I'll tell you, because he over obsesses. So
no, for her, it was a relief.
Aww.
That she knew what it was. She wasn't just some strange kid. There was a reason for all of this. She could figure herself out. And she now considers it a very important part of her personality.
All right, I'm going to ask you a question that's not on our list of questions because I always love this question. I was asked, I worked in an ABA center for a few years, and the director always asked new staff who had individuals on the spectrum in their life, would you have, if there was a pill that could fix autism, would you give it to your daughter?
No.
Exactly. Same here. I feel like it makes them who they are, and they're amazing people. I was just curious.
Oh, heavens no. Now, if you could give her a pill that would take away all of the PTSD, yes. That's one of our biggest issues. Has been that.
As we say, it's always the conditions that make the autism worse. Because like the autism can be fine on its own, but it's when you start adding, for yours, PTSD, for mine, anxiety and depression. So I get it.
So Joyce,
yes.
You answered a little bit of this question just because we mentioned the PTSD, but I'm curious, are there particular activities or particular stages in life that have been a struggle for your child or your family, given all that's going on or has gone on? Yeah.
Everything. Rebecca's PTSD has been particularly bad. We can't just call it bullying. It was more like torture and abuse, because when her elementary classmates could not get to her in middle school, they found kids that could and told them what to do. And so it was basically her entire class against her. And it was really, really severe. In middle school, she was suicidal, extreme depression, meltdowns constantly. As a family, we basically just didn't go anywhere or do anything because we didn't know what would happen. So it really curtailed a lot of that. But my husband and I are homebodies anyway, so that really wasn't a big, horrible deal. But it did affect our oldest daughter a lot. It was just really tough for her. I don't know how to explain it. She lives out of state now and doesn't come home too often, but she and Rebecca have developed a really good relationship now. They didn't used to be.
Is it mainly distance, do you feel like that's helped them build that relationship?
Well, they're 7 years apart. So a lot of it had to do with age too.
Mm-hmm.
I lived that experience too. I get what you're saying there, Joyce.
Yeah. But now that Rebecca is older, there's more common interests. There's more mutual understanding on things. So they do a lot better now.
I always feel like school and the doctors are the hardest part of growing up with autism. Just the finding the right doctor and the right school, the right teacher to help kind of fill in those gaps for your individual. What do you see was maybe a hindrance with doctors, especially since you had a female on the spectrum? I mean, that had to have been.
Actually, our doctor that she had while she was growing up was fantastic because he also had a daughter that had special needs and also did not like the school system we were in. So we had a lot of sympathy and a lot of support from him. We really had a very good relationship with the doctor. We have now changed doctors and we are gradually introducing her to the new doctor. And he has a female nurse practitioner. So I think that will help a great deal. She's very proactive in her own
advocacy.
Yes, for herself. She's very strong in that. The doctor's not really the problem. School, on the other hand, was horrible.
It's always one or the other, I feel like.
Yeah. And she explained it so well Tuesday night to another young woman in her support group that our homeschooling failed miserably in the 3 years or the 2 years that she was home, because she was in a private school for a year, that it failed horribly. Unmitigated disaster is what I call it, because home was her safe place and school was not. So when I tried to be the teacher, that was too much for her. Well, when she returned to school, she went to a different school. It's actually where I work. The private school that she went to, that teacher was working there. And so we were able to create a safe room for her to go to when she felt she needed it. And in the 4 years, she never used it once, but just knowing it was there. A lot of the teachers I had been there long enough by that time that I knew all the teachers. A lot of the students were aware of who she was. She got a lot of, "Oh, you're Mrs. Thomas's daughter." Those connections kept her from hating it. And she made a couple of very, very good friends that she still has.
And that's awesome, because I feel like once they have that friend, that's who they stick with for years. Like, they are very loyal.
Mm-hmm. Yes, she is.
So, Joyce, what do you wish you knew at the beginning of your autism journey that you know now?
Oh, that's a good question. That's really a good question. I'm not sure I can answer that one. I guess just how much of her is based on being autistic, how much of her personality that is. And by knowing her, you know, once you get to know her, you find this absolutely amazing person. I don't know how else to explain it.
It's kind of their heart is of gold, you know,
Mm-hmm.
like they really wouldn't harm a fly, mainly because they want the fly to live, you know, and
Mm-hmm.
prosper. And I don't know. Yeah.
What I always find interesting when you start knowing individuals on the spectrum more, just how creative they are.
Oh.
But for each individual, that is in different ways. I happen to know Rebecca, so I know a little bit about some of her creative activities. And I wish that I think autism is a part of that creativity, but sometimes people who meet individuals with autism have this barrier that then they don't think those other things are possible. Oh, well, autism is a disability, and that somehow makes them less than, where it's like, no, they're individuals just like you and I. They have hopes and dreams just like you and I. And so it's important, I think, and that's one of the roles I feel like I've been as a parent forever. And I'm sure Joyce and Sam feel the same way, that part of my job is to spread that message so that you don't see autism, you see just another kid.
Exactly.
Yes.
That would be great, right? If everyone just saw them the way we see them.
Well, she's a little hard to get to know because, again, she doesn't always trust well because of the PTSD. But once you get to know her, then it's this whole nother person that just is, as Susan says, she knows Rebecca. She's extremely creative, self-taught, computer graphics. Her artwork is really great. Taught herself to animate when she was 8 years old on a GIMP program. You know, just, I went to school for computer graphics, and she is so far beyond what anything I could do. She taught her teacher in high school how to use GIMP. Yeah, she's amazing. I'm a paper pencil artist. She is a computer artist.
That's cool. So she thought about doing anything with that for a career?
Not really. I think at this point, we're still sort of, school is evil and I don't want to go back. So we're sort of working on, you know, eventually you really may want to go back, because I think being the advocate is the thing that she really at heart loves doing.
I understand that.
The company she works for is so good to her. They accommodate her because she does not drive. And so they do a Zoom meeting with her every month for her part. And she, you know, they love her. They have told her if she goes somewhere and moves, they will continue to do it this way because that they want to keep her.
Aww.
So I think the advocacy is what she wants to do.
Okay.
We just have to get to a way of doing it.
So what, does she have any therapies? We always like to ask.
Not at this point.
Okay.
She goes to the Sisters on the Spectrum, or Spectrum Sister. I can't. Oh Lord. Sisters on the Spectrum.
No, it is Spectrum Sisters, my autism ally group. So if you're interested in joining the ladies, drop us an email, hop on our social media. We put all kinds of information out about our Spectrum Sisters group, which is for individuals on the autism spectrum ages 18 and older who are female.
How did you handle issues with puberty and sex education with your child?
Well, I have this wonderful thing called an older daughter. And the 7 years difference worked wonderfully here because Rebecca gets embarrassed if she has to talk to me about it. But if she talks to her sister, she's fine. So her sister explained the world to her, helped with a lot of those things. You know, things like shaving and using deodorant. That was an ongoing battle for a long time. And then about 17 or 18, it clicked.
Ooh.
And now that she's out of high school, it's even clicking more. I worked, I said I worked in the mental health field, and I worked at a rehabilitation facility for mentally and physically disabled adults. And one of the things I learned is there's a plateau. They just get to a plateau. We just don't go anywhere for a while. And then in a couple of years, boom, you grow like crazy. And maybe after 3 or 4 more years, you hit a little bit more of a plateau. And I think that's what probably is part of puberty with people with disabilities, is it just takes them a little bit longer to get that all figured out. And with the help of her sister, we're doing much, much better.
Awesome.
Our arm, she'd be embarrassed as all get out, but grooming is much better.
Shaving, my son doesn't shave his own face, so it's sensory. There's a lot of moving parts with that. What was maybe one of her bigger challenges with that?
Probably the biggest challenge has been washing the hair.
Okay.
Just because she doesn't like to get her head wet. She don't like to have her face wet, kind of thing. So that one's been a big challenge, but she's doing much, much better. Do you have that one was, do I have any hints? No. Yeah. No. That one just took time.
Okay. So time is still a tip.
I still consider the fact that I'm still raising her. My oldest daughter is raised and is an independent young woman who lives on her own. I would never in a million years tell her how to dress or tell her how to groom, not in a million years. Rebecca, on the other hand, I don't feel she's done growing yet. Okay. I'm still raising her.
Okay. Which I feel the same way about my own. This is not my favorite question because I'm not ready to think of this personally. Have you considered what life would be like without you? Once you have gone, what life looks like for Rebecca? And have you done any planning on that?
That's a hard question because I don't like to think about that either. But her sister has always said that Rebecca will be her responsibility. That is she will never leave her hanging. My brother and I both inherited some money. He has no children. So the girls will inherit everything from him. My oldest daughter will be the one who will take care of the money, make sure Rebecca has what she wants. We're hoping in a few years that Rebecca moves out. And maybe we're not quite ready to start exploring those options yet. But I know that there's cast housing out there. I know there's other things. So we figure another year or two into it, we're going to start looking at those things because she's just not quite ready yet.
Okay. And that's totally fair. And for those of you who don't know what cast housing is, you really need to Google, look them up. That is definitely a really amazing adventure that works for some families. And when I mean adventure, I just think they now have cast gardens where they're got employment for those individuals that live in those homes. And it's just a really neat thing to check out. So I do recommend that.
Not to mention that if you wait long enough, you might actually hear about them through the podcast.
Yeah. That might happen. Just maybe. I'm with you, Joyce. This is not a topic that I like to think about. I mean, we've done the same thing. My middle son, which is my oldest, is the one with Asperger's. So my middle son has been told, or not told, he understands that he's going to have to be that support person for his brother.
Mm-hmm.
So I think you get that system in place prior, but it's not, in a way, they're going to have to figure it out on their own too.
Yeah.
Like I can't fix it for them.
Well, and
Rebecca is one of these kids. Susan, you'll appreciate this. She's already started looking up SSI and Medicaid because her insurance coverage of under her father will run out in a few years. So she's already started researching on her own.
well, and as a parent who, we just went through a lot of this financial planning.
Mm-hmm.
We had to go for guardianship for Matthew, and kind of at the same time, because, you're paying the lawyer, and let's just make this one big full check, then, lots of little cuts. So, you set up your will and you set up the special needs trust, and you start thinking about all the things that need to be in place to try to not make it as overwhelming. For us, our older child is obviously going to be very instrumental in his future when we're gone. But, hey, that's why we as autism parents will live forever, right? Because I can't die.
Amen.
I'm not supposed to die. But that's really not
I
the
think
plan you
in my
should be
plan.
banking on.
Yeah,
I think the siblings of children with disabilities are superheroes, because we have had another case in our family with a child who had a severe disability, and his two siblings were just amazing with him. And, he has since passed away, and we miss him desperately. He was a big part of our family. And so I think that the siblings really deserve a lot of credit for being those superheroes that step up and step forward for their siblings.
I think they have an interesting point of view from it, because they get to see the abuse that is done to an individual. So they're really in it without being in it, And I feel like that helps them be more compassionate as individuals as well. Because my middle son, yes, he can be a pain in the butt to his brother, but that's because he's his brother. But if someone else treats his brother badly, he's there to make sure his brother's okay.
Yeah. And actually, to add to that, we discovered that my brother is undiagnosed, but we did not realize this until he was an adult, but he is also on the spectrum.
That happens.
Yeah. And that was the exact, I could mess with him as a kid, and I was horrible to him. I know I was, but somebody else messes with him, man, I'm going to take him out. That's all there was to it.
So also in this lovely podcast that we do a section called You Are an Autism Parent If. Didn't know if you have you may be an autism parent if.
Oh yeah. You may be an autism parent. You may be an autism parent if you know more about dinosaurs than you ever hope to know, even if your child is a girl.
There you go.
Oh, isn't that funny?
She had dinosaurs everywhere. T-Rex from Build-A-Bear, blow up from something at the Coliseum that her dad took her to. Every book we could find on dinosaurs. I mean, to this day, she will tell you exactly which dinosaur it is you're looking at.
Very good.
But my oldest daughter, when she was younger, was very much into Pokemon. she would sit in the back seat with Rebecca, and everywhere we went, she would sit there with her Pokemon book and drill Rebecca on how to say every Pokemon name correctly, because they're broken up into syllables, and she would not let her go on to the next one until she had it right. Rebecca never had to have speech therapy. She had it in the back seat with Pokemon.
Oh,
I love that. Hey, you had your own therapist in the back seat. That's awesome.
Yes, we did. And that's what my daughter does. She loves language.
Oh, that's cool.
Side brag, she just got accepted for her master. She got into a doctorate program for criminal justice. She's a pretty smart cookie too.
See, I love those kind of stories because that's what your kiddo helped the other one.
It takes all of us to raise her. I mean, you've got to be completely involved as a family, because if you're not, and it's just on mom, you're going to flounder, you're going to be in deep, and you'll never climb out, kind of thing. I'm very lucky. My husband knows that I know how to handle her, but he is more than willing to always to step in. They go do things together. Her sister takes her, goes shopping when she comes up to visit. They hang out on their own. There's definitely, it takes the village plus more to raise a child who's autistic.
I love
agreed.
That. Very accurate on whether it's your family just inside or your family with grandparents involved. You've just got to friends. I mean, there's times where I always like telling this story. I have a friend who every time we'd go over to their house, they had a spare bedroom, and she knew that that's where my kid would go because he would get oversensitized. And it was nice. We could still be sociable and still have friends. And they had kids on the spectrum who were more sociable than mine. Mine could sit there for 10 minutes, but then needed a break from people because he was getting overwhelmed. And she always, as soon as we'd get into the house, she'd say, don't forget, you can go down to that spare bedroom. It's yours. No one will go in there while you're here. It's yours. And just that acknowledgement helped, because then it was like we could relax and enjoy our time, and then he could go away if he needed to and felt safe. So it's nice when people all understand.
Yeah. And that's back to where she graduated from. If I can, Prairie Heights is an amazing school. And that's part of what they gave her, was part of the village. Everybody from the high school to the elementary knew who she was. And it didn't matter which building she was in. Somebody would keep an eye out for her. She walked from the high school over to the elementary. We're all on one campus. And she would walk from the high school to the elementary her first semester to come and meet me to go home. And the secretary at the desk would greet her. They would say hello to her. Started out, she wouldn't speak. By the end of the semester, she was chatting with them. Everybody knew her story and knew what was going on. And it was the best environment for her. She just did amazing there because everybody knew me and everybody knew her. And so if a teacher would say to her, look, I can email your mom if you need me to. And then that's a lot of times that's all it would take.
Hey, Joyce, I'm curious. When you look back on the time that Rebecca was being bullied, do you see where you go, dang it, I wish I'd have done this differently?
Oh, definitely.
So what would you tell caregivers that are in a similar situation? Because that was probably a time when there was a lot less attention by school admin to bullying and things, but still situations similar to that are happening today. So what tidbit of information would you give families?
If your child can't talk to you, about what's going on, which was our problem, she could not tell us. She could not figure out how to explain it. Find somebody that's sympathetic enough in the school that will talk to you. In my case, in elementary, I happened to be really good friends with a teacher that both of my girls had had. And she was the one who was saying, you need to check this out. In middle school, a teacher I had worked with at Prairie Heights had moved to this school. And he's the one who I had asked to observe her. And he said, this is what's going on. This is what I'm seeing. This is what the problems are. And if I had been aware of what both of my girls, my oldest one will tell you too, she was bullied because they're academic. They're not the sports, and this school was a lot about sports. If I had perfect vision, 20/20 vision in those days, and could have redone it, I would have pulled her before middle school, had her repeat a grade, and would have moved her to a different school.
Which you ultimately did.
Which I ultimately did
anyway, yes. But that was a little bit later. Okay.
Yeah, I would have just done it sooner, but find somebody in the school that, even if it's a paraprofessional or, I don't care, the janitor, the ladies in the lunchroom, they all see things. Find somebody who sees what's happening to your child, because a lot of times the child can't tell you.
Well, and it's hard to verbalize what's going on if you've never had it happen before. How do you explain something you don't know and don't understand? So I get that.
Yeah, we were very lucky. We were able to find those people, but just didn't move fast enough.
Thank you for sharing that, because I think some of our listeners will find that impactful for their situation. So,
well, and the other thing is, you can't feel guilty for what you didn't understand as a parent. That doesn't do your child
all things, not just
that doesn't
school.
But that doesn't do your child any good.
Exactly.
It's happened. We're going to deal with it. We need to move on. And that was a hard lesson because there was a lot of guilt.
I'm sure there was. I can think of things that I wish I would have done completely differently with Matthew at 3, 4, 5 years old, but you didn't gain the knowledge until they were older. And, hindsight's 20/20. It's
exactly
to look back and go, well, I would have done this instead of this.
Especially when your child's not diagnosed until they're at the end of middle school.
That supports that would have been available to you. Yeah. That, through an IEP, through case conferences, through different types of things weren't available to you at the time this was going on. So,
right.
Well, and I guess that's the big thing here. Like, if she would have been properly diagnosed the first time, that could have changed the outcome. What happened. And I think what you said is perfect. We all do, as parents, we hold that guilt and stuff, but it doesn't do us any good to help our kids to keep that guilt. And it doesn't help the kiddo.
There's also another real amazing part to this. Before quarantine, there was a post on Facebook that Rebecca's one friend from this previous school sent to her. And it was about what happened to Rebecca, because we didn't even tell Rebecca she wasn't going back. We just, at the end of middle school, you're done. Once school was out, then we told her. And so she just disappeared as far as they were concerned. And this girl said, she always felt bad. She wondered whatever happened to her. And she did a search for her. And what she found was the article that was written about Rebecca in the Steuben Republican. At the end of her senior year, she was chosen as the most improved student unanimously by the administration and teachers. And they did an interview with her. She talked about her previous school and what she went through. and how proud she was to graduate and what she planned on doing, which, by the way, has completely changed. And she wanted to share this with the other classmates. And through that, Rebecca started receiving apologies from the majority of them were female through this thread on Facebook. And I joined it and said, this is her mother. She is reading everything that you are posting. Then the next day, this all happened in one day. The next day, I had received a text through Messenger from a young man who actually was one of the ones who initially started the bullying in elementary school with an apology. A lot of these young women that were in her class were saying, I wish I had known then what I know now. I wish I hadn't wanted to be so accepted by the crowd and went along with them, because it basically was her entire class. I will teach my children to not be like this, that I will stop this cycle. This will never happen with my children, blah, 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 blah. Actually, in the end, a couple of the girls came up and we sat and chatted with them for quite a while. But in the end, they said, if Rebecca wants to contact us, that's great. If she doesn't, that's okay too. And left their contact. And we talked about it afterwards. And she said, I really don't want to talk to them, but I really feel better for seeing them and for getting the apologies. And I said, well, you have taught all of these people something. Because of you, their children are going to be better than they were. And she got a lot of confidence from that. She had been scared to go to the hometown where this school is. And now she says, I'm not afraid to do that. Like I said, Rebecca's an unusual person. This is not everyone's typical story. Early diagnosis, intervention, therapies, da, da, da. This is not what happened with Rebecca. Rebecca's story, I know, is extremely different, but she is an amazing young woman. Well, both of my daughters are amazing young women. I have to say that, they both are.
Of course they are.
Yes. I'm proud of them both.
Joyce, you're right. Your story is different, but that's part of the reason why we wanted you to come on today to share your story, because if you've met one individual with autism, you've met one individual with autism, and every story that families can hear, they can take that little piece of information with them and take it forward on their own autism journey. So I just want to thank you for joining us today, sharing your story.
Well, you're welcome. I've enjoyed it very much.
This next segment, you may be an autism parent if you step over the perfect straight line of toys in the hallway just to avoid the meltdown. If you would like to submit a You May Be an Autism Parent If, please call us at 260-207-4686 and leave us a message. Maybe you'll hear it on our next podcast.
Thanks for listening. Please stay connected with us on Facebook, Instagram, and sign up for our newsletter at myautismally.org. Talk with you next time at the My Autism Ally podcast.